Welcome, audio traveler. In this coding tutorial you can learn how to implement audio drag and drop. From your plugin into the door, from your plugin into some folder, and from your plugin into some other component of your plugin. In the context of my VST3 plugin Hammer und Meißel, written in C++ with the JUCE framework. The JUCE framework has been developed and improved since 2004 until today. It was not solely intended for VST development, but for audio development in general, and it always aims to be cross-platform. I would recommend musicians who have no prior experience with programming to get started with JUCE, because you learn a lot of good practices simply by working with a solid code base. However, this framework has become huge and complex. You can easily get lost in the documentation, trying to find a solution only for the solution to be completely somewhere else in the end. That's why I sometimes like to make videos in which I highlight specific features of the framework that somehow stand out to me. I want to kick things off by just explaining what exactly we expect our drag and drop feature to do now. Whenever the little label of my plugin Hammer und Meißel is being dragged, we want to be able to drop it somewhere outside of the plugin. For example, into an audio track in your DAW, but also maybe onto your desktop. Because the thing we dragged is a 10-second audio file that was recorded from the plugin's output. The goal is to enable sound designers to get bounced audio without relying on their DAW's bounce workflows. We first need to write a class for our plugin processor that just records onto an audio buffer continuously, so that we can read it out later when the drag and drop action begins. I called it plugin recorder. It has two audio buffers and an integer as writehead. You can make the buffers 10 seconds long in prepare to play. In the processing function, you just copy the input samples into your recording buffer. I'm wrapping the writehead index around the recording's buffer number of samples because those are the 10 seconds of capacity we prepared it for. Unlike prepare and the processing function, the method getRecording is not supposed to be called from the audio thread, but from the message thread. The message thread has multiple jobs. One of them is to handle the user interface. Unless you use some GPU accelerated structures like OpenGL or Vulkan renders, of course. I don't do that. I keep things simple. You just gotta know the audio processor needs to be stopped temporarily while this method is being called, because it copies values from the recording buffer to the output buffer before passing it on to the place where this function is being implemented. If you copied those values while new values are being written to the recording buffer, the values could be corrupted in weird ways. For example, by ending up none. But more about that later. Also notice how I normalize the buffer before presenting it to the function where getRecording is being implemented. That way you can let users drag and drop audio freely without having to worry about gain staging. But you might have already started wondering where in the editor's code do you even implement getRecording. This is my label plugin recorder class. It inherits from label and DragAndDropContainer. DragAndDropContainer is the class you need to inherit a component from if you want to let the user drag something somewhere else. You override the mouse down function of a class if you want it to react to mouse clicks that can also be drags. In this case, I want every mouse click on this label to save a new WAV file, and then start a drag operation with this slightly convoluted looking method call. This is what you've been waiting for the entire time. You suspend the audio processing so that you can safely call getRecording, and then you continue the audio processing, because now you got a 10-second buffer that is easy to work with right in your editor. If saving it as a WAV file was successful, the class member variable file now knows about the file that you want to drop somewhere. Saving a float audio buffer as a WAV file looks like this, by the way. You basically get the file. If it already exists, you delete it because you are about to make a new one, then you copy paste all this code. The code can return false at some point, but if you provide it with a valid audio buffer and file path, it always works. This is how you get the file. You first need your project to have an application properties object somewhere, usually as part of the processor. This object is useful for handling the kind of plugin state that should not be dynamic to different instances of the plugin, unlike parameter values. The application properties object can lead you to a safe folder for these kind of temporary file creations and provide you with a child file like this. Pro gamer move. For debugging, I like to add a reveal to user line to methods like this so that I can immediately check if everything works correctly when running the plugin, because it will point to the folder or file in the Windows Explorer then. That was quite a lot. Unfortunately, we are not done yet. I will not explain what the source description is useful for yet, but I can tell you what's up with the scaled image in Start Dragging. It is this image that follows the drag operation to inform the user that they are in fact doing something special here. I just drew a little curved path onto an image in the constructor of my label plugin recorder. Don't forget to override this function, should drop files when dragged externally. It returns true if it should be possible to drag files out of the plugin. In my case, it always returns true. But most importantly, it gives you a string array called files, and it's used to carry the information about the file path. You can set can move files to true if you want the file to be moved to its destination. But I'm okay with the copy operation because I keep overwriting the same WAV file, which doesn't waste storage space anyway. Just a nice little backup copy. Also, if you drag it into the DAW, you want it to copy, so that you are not working on the original material, but on a copy, and when you at some point have new original material in that folder, it will not correspond to the same file. That works already, and it looks and feels nice. Awesome. You can close the window now. Just kidding, there is another layer to this that you shouldn't miss out on. Cause like, what if you actually wanna drag and drop the WAV file back onto the plugin? Hammer und Meißel is a modal filter plugin that lets you drag and drop WAV files onto its modal material editor to let it interpret its harmonic content as modal material. How do you implement that, you ask? Now here is where things get a little hairy, to be honest. This is the modal material editor's component, and it has to inherit both from FileDragAndDropTarget and from DragAndDropTarget. I will tell you why soon, but before doing that, I would like to remind you to like the video and subscribe to my channel, because then YouTube thinks that it's worth money. You can also donate cash via PayPal or Patreon if you want to support me directly, or jump into my Discord group and just discuss cool stuff with me, like sound design, beat making or audio programming. Okay, back at the modal material editor. Now I'll tell you the difference between FileDragAndDropTarget and DragAndDropTarget and why we need both of them. FileDragAndDropTarget is meant for drag and drop operations coming from outside of the plugin, and DragAndDropTarget reacts to the drag and drop operations that came from inside of the plugin, while having been mainly intended to go outside of it. Does that make sense? I hope so. For FileDragAndDropTarget to work, you need to override the isInteressedInFileDrag function. It returns true if the component is interested in the files that are currently being dragged. In this case, it means it should be exactly one audio file. By the way, this is what the isAudioFile method looks like. Always make sure to put the file extension to lowercase before comparing it to your audio file extension strings, or else it won't accept files that are written in all caps. Ignore the drag any components error messages. They are meant to give the user animated feedback on the state of this drag operation. But it would be a little bit too off topic to talk about my custom animation system now. For now, you just gotta know that the animation starts when the drag enters the component, and it stops when the drag operation leaves the component. If the files were dropped successfully, the animation is also stopped, and you can finally load the audio file and do something with it. Be careful, because you likely interact with things that are read from the audio thread here. For example, I update the modal material based on the input file's audio content. This is what loading an audio file looks like, by the way. You can basically copy-paste this into your project as is, except for the material fill buffer call, because that's just what my modal material does with input audio. Now that was how to accept audio files being dragged into the plugin. Next up, I will show you what you have to do to let the plugin drag onto itself with DragAndDropTarget. Just like with FileDragAndDropTarget, DragAndDropTarget has a method that returns true if the component wants to express interest in the file that is currently being dragged. This time there is no string array with file paths though, but a source information. Here you can read the source description string. I want you to remember now that you already saw this string in the label plugin recorder's mouse down method, where it was used to give an identifier to this drag operation. I suppose this is useful if you have various kinds of drag operations in a single plugin. Get the DnD file was pretty much the same as get the file in the label plugin processor, and if I was a little bit less lazy I would probably write this into a dedicated header so that I don't have to repeat myself throughout my code base, as that is error prone. The item dropped method is where things get real. I stop the animation, and if everything is okay with the drag operation and the audio file, I load the audio file and update the material, just like in the files dropped method before. Also I stop the animation again. Don't ask me why, but for some reason that was needed. There you have it. You just learned a lot about the things to care about when implementing various types of drag and drop behavior for your plugin project, while also creating and managing an audio file. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and a sub, and or donate cash via PayPal or Patreon. Also feel free to join my Discord and discuss audio stuff with me. Farewell, audio travelers.